All right, and Congressman Foster, you can take it away.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. For those of you who might not know me, I'm Congressman Bill Foster. I'm a scientist and businessman, proud to represent the 11th Congressional District of Illinois in the House of Representatives of the United States. Well, thank you all for being here for what I hope will be a meaningful and thoughtful discussion of Black History Month and what it means to our country. I'm especially honored to be joined with really an outstanding panel of leaders from our community. We have Regina Brent, the founder and president of Unity Partnership. She is a longtime advocate and a retired Illinois Attorney General's office supervisor. Ms. Brent has had decades of public service and works to build trust between law enforcement and the community through bridge building initiatives. Gloria Van Hoff, the founder of the McHenry County Juneteenth organization and an Underground Railroad historian and researcher. As a McHenry County board member and an educator, she brings an extensive experience in community leadership, education, and historical scholarship. Michael Childress, president of the DuPage County NAACP and the DuPage County Board Vice President. He leads advocacy and community empowerment efforts across DuPage County, advancing equity through civic engagement, education, and justice initiatives. Sherman Jenkins, president and author at SLJ Communications and Consulting, a former Aurora alderman and economic development leader. He's helped shape key regional initiatives and publishes a digital outlet highlighting African American life beyond Chicago. Well, thank you all, not only for being here today, but for the work that you do every day to strengthen our communities and to lift up others. And I'm excited to listen, to learn, and to reflect alongside of all of you. This year marks the 100th anniversary of Black History Month. Black History Month offers us all a chance to reflect on the state of our nation and to remember that making progress is not always easy. It's an opportunity to honor not only the accomplishments of the past, but to recommit ourselves to the work that remains ahead. As the son of a civil rights lawyer, this month has always been a little bit personal for me. When I was growing up, my dad would share stories about traveling throughout the South and seeing the injustices that African Americans faced. And as a child, I could not understand the hate and anger that so many people felt toward men, women, and children who were just trying to live their lives just because of the color of their skin. And as an adult, I know that we have to continue to challenge the hatred and the bigotry wherever we see it. And although the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed more than 60 years ago, we still see the forces of anger, hate, and divisiveness in our country today. And so how do we respond to this? On one hand, we can grow bitter and cynical, or we can try to rise above those feelings and come together to continue the fight for justice and for equality. That's really what Black History Month calls us to do, to reflect honestly on our past, to confront the realities of our present, and to work together to build a more just and equitable future. So I'm grateful to each of you for being part of that work. And now I guess I'd like to pass it over to each of our panelists to sort of give their introductions. Regina, I'll start with you.
Well, thank you, Congressman. I want you to know that it's an honor and a pleasure to join this esteemed panel. And you're one of our fondest congressmen in the district. We've been in support of you for many, many years. And so I really feel like it's a privilege to be asked to be in on this discussion regarding the African American community. I not only head up as founder and president of Unity Partnership, but I'm also the co-chair for the Martin Luther King breakfast that takes place every year in DuPage County to take us from chaos to a community. It's about the beloved community, and it draws about 1,400 people a year in the coldest weather of the year to come together for one day for many different walks of life to bring about the love, unity, and compassion for one another. So thank you again for inviting me.
And let's see, I'll go to Gloria next.
Well, hello, my name is Gloria Van Hoff, and I'm in McHenry County. And if you don't know where that is, it's one of these counties that still, I think, identifies as deeply red. So I've been in the county for 50 years. Oh my goodness, I just looked out and see that there's snow coming out, snow drifting out there. But
You
so
are up north, aren't you?
so I moved to Illinois when I was 18 years old, and I lived in Elgin in Kane County for 2 years and worked at Chicago Area Industries. And I was all set because my goal was to get a PhD in psychology. So I made a lot of detours along the way. Um, I'm still getting there. I'm working on my PhD in health psychology, but along the way, I acquired 4 other degrees, and I've worked full time all my life, so that's why it's taking me so long. But I moved out to McHenry County when I was 20 years old, and it's been very interesting. I ran for office for state rep in 2002, and everyone said you have to run a second time. No one wins the first time out. And I said, well, I'm going to give it all I've got this first time, and if I don't win, that's it. I'll, maybe consider running again at some date, but I have to work on my career. I had to consider what's going on there. So I did. I dropped out of after not winning that race. We had one myself. We had an independent, and we had a Republican who won that race. But it was a good experience for me. It got me really connected with the Democratic Party in McHenry County. And then I went about my career. I'm a licensed nursing home administrator, and I was at working in long-term care when COVID hit in 2020. And so I was so happy that I stayed in long-term care for as long as I did, because I think I was meant to be there during that time. I don't think anyone else, when I think about our past administrators, would have done the things that I knew I needed to do, because I never had any question about what my job was. My job was to take care of the clients. That was my primary job. So if you felt a little uncomfortable about taking the vaccine, we had that very narrow window from October 1st to December 31st, when administrators got to make the decision, are we going to require our employees to take the vaccine, or will we do weekly testing? So my boss, the executive director, came to me and said, what are you going to do, Gloria? And I said, I think you know what I'm going to do. He said, I need to hear it from you. What are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to require that our employees take the vaccine. And he said, good for you. So everyone was angry, not everyone, but maybe 50% of the people were angry with me, because a lot of people were quitting and leaving. We were already short on staff, and they said, more people are going to leave now, Gloria. And I said, I don't care. I would rather work around the clock than have someone who comes here and is not willing to protect themselves. So we had two exceptions where we could grant, and one was religious and one was medical. So no doctor was going to sign a form saying that the vaccine would be harmful. So we had one religious exemption, and someone came to me and said, her supervisor said, I went to her church's website. There's nothing like that. And I said, listen, we have 145 employees. If we have one person who says that they have a religious exemption, I'm going to honor that. And I said, and she's young and she's healthy. And when she comes down with COVID, which she will, she'll recover. And in 2 weeks, she had tested positive. So anyway, to wrap that up, we were surrounded in Lake County, where I was working, by long-term care facilities that had double-digit deaths. At Riverside Foundation, where I was, we had 5. And that was because of the protocols that we put into place. We had an amazing team. And when they saw that what we were doing was working, then everybody got on board. So that's who I am. I'm the first Black woman to be elected to the McHenry County Board in their 186-year history, and spend a lot of my time doing Underground Railroad research and lectures all over. So thank you, Congressman Foster, for inviting me to be here. It's truly a joy to be among other people who are doing great things in the community.
Thank you. And I always learn so much when I listen to Gloria speak, because there's so many different sides to her. So let's see, Michael, do you want to emerge from the sunshine and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Congressman.
He's speaking to us from heaven, it looks like.
I'm a 40-year resident of DuPage County. Man, time really flies. When I came here, I was a young man, and it just seems like it just flew by. And when people say life is short, you better believe them, because it goes really, really fast. I graduated college in 1978. I had three bachelors, one in organizational psychology, sociology, and business management, and I use all of them all the time. I also have I don't have a PhD, but I have 2 masters, one in human resource management and the other in an MBA. The one thing I've found is that the MBA, a master's teach you how to get a good job, but an MBA teaches you how to run the company, and I really enjoyed that course of study. Like Gloria, DuPage County is 187 years old, and I am the first African American to have won a seat on the county board. And with that, I stand on a lot of shoulders, Regina being one. A lot of people have paved ways for me to get there, but I was actually surprised that our county chair approached me about being the vice chair. So not only am I the first Black on the county board, but I'm also vice chair, and I'm excited about that. Some of the committees I chair, Public Works. I'm also on economic development. I'm on technology, among other committees that keep me busy. I go back to the civil rights era. I was actually Fred Hampton's mother's paper boy. And that was back in the day when they had afternoon papers. We don't know anything about that now. We barely have newspapers now, but it was the Chicago American, and then they were bought out by the Chicago Today. But I made a whopping $30 a month, and when I think about that, I was telling my wife that's literally $1 a day to carry papers all over Maywood. I was part of the Black Panther Party's breakfast program and the after school program, kept us off the streets, and I know that the media painted the Panthers as some sort of hate group, but that was not the case. They were community activists that made sure that, the kids got their vaccines. A lot of the things that we should be doing now, they were doing then. Getting our vaccines, feeding us before we went to school, knowing that, a full stomach, you needed a full stomach to be properly educated. After school, had to do your homework, and then had recreation games in the rec center on 9th and Madison in Maywood. My real introduction into the fight for civil rights, in addition to knowing Fred Hampton, Mark Clark, Congressman, I can't think of his name off. He got drawn a blank. just retired, I think. I'll remember
Bobby
it before.
Rush? What?
Bobby Rush. I can
Yeah,
remember
no.
seeing them as really young men.
Yeah, well, I only knew him as an old man, older man. And, I was trying to imagine him as, I think he founded the Illinois chapter of the Black Panthers, right?
Yes.
And so it was it's so interesting serving with him because he was like almost shy.
Hmm.
And that had obviously such an impact.
I can remember sitting, as I would bring the papers up, they would be out on the stoop of their mother of his mother's house, just talking strategy and talking about how to make the community better. Um, it was it was really kind of like I said when I said earlier that life goes fast. I can say you knew him as an older man. I knew him he was really barely out of his teens at that time, and I was probably 8, 9 years old as a paper boy. So, but one of the instructions I got from Fred's mother was that her house had to be the last house that I delivered my paper to because she fed me after I delivered the paper. So, and then I'd sit out and just listen, just as a sponge, just soaking things in. I didn't have anything to say, but just was listening. From there, I joined Operation Breadbasket um, under Jesse Jackson. My uncle was a Pullman Porter and was part of that organization. And I used to just hang around and tag around him. But the funny thing about that was Jesse was the first person that introduced me to what apartheid was. I wasn't sure what that was at all. And he actually explained it to me. So I joined the Free South Africa movement and started into the letter writing campaign to have the United States divest itself from all activities in South Africa. Um, Stayed with that for till I pretty much went off to college, and then there was another organization I got involved with called In Fact. In Fact was a organization that was formed because we had companies in the United States that had tainted baby formula that was ruled where you couldn't sell it in the United States, so they were turning around selling it to third world countries. And we started to write letters and talk to our Congress people about that, and that got shut down. So um, just being an overall activist has just been something that I don't even think about. It's just something that I just do. If there's a wrong being perpetrated on the people of this country, then you can pretty much count me in. I'll be front and center with that. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Congressman.
Okay. And now we can hear from Sherman and be interested to see what part of your past you pluck from here, or all of it.
Oh, again, I like everyone else. I thank you, Congressman Foster, for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this panel and to talk about Black History Month and what it means. My history is varied from the standpoint of I grew up in Chicago, South Side, and Woodlawn. And as Brother Childress was bringing up about Bobby Rush and Mark Clark and the others, it brought back a memory. I think I was in 8th grade, and one of my fellow students was the brother of Bobby Rush. And I'll never forget, and it's just when he was talking about it, how that morning we came in to class, it was like everyone was quiet, and they said, Bobby Rush's little younger brother said they came to the apartment and raided it and killed Fred Hampton. And, we were just, you were just stunned. And so they were working to get him and his parents and all, hidden somewhere, because they was figuring that they were going to come and make other strikes, and get other members of the family. So but I was growing up on the South Side. I moved to Aurora in 1983, and been here ever since. My company, SOJ Communications, we put together a publication called Tell Me Something Good, which we all need. Tell each other something good as often as we can. And I started it because it just came to me, and once it kicked off, it just took off. And it's a monthly publication, it's free. And it just basically, people say, well, how do I put something in there or advertise? Well, just remember, tell us something good. No philosophical beliefs and all that. Just tell us something good. And as long as you keep that in mind, then we can be able to do that. From there, it's been into, I was in public relations. I was the head of two youth serving organizations in Chicago. I was a director of communications for Chicago Youth Centers and for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Chicago. And from there, I went into national public relations with Golan Harris. I was on the McDonald's team, where we worked and put on the 100 band kids. We took them to New York for the Macy's Day Parade, the McDonald's All-American High School basketball game. I met and worked with Shaq and all the others when they were high schoolers. And Shaq was a very well-disciplined young man, because his father was a military guy. And he used to always tell us, if I mess up, he's gonna whoop my behind. So I don't. And but there were some very good times when my kids had the opportunity to meet them and take pictures. And from there, I eventually came to Aurora. I was assistant director and then executive director for economic development. And I was proud to have been there, working with a lot of key individuals who wanted to turn Aurora around. Those of you might remember, Aurora had a bad rap, and it went down because it was considered the mini Chicago back in the day, in the 40s and the 50s. And then it fell on some hard times. Then you had the gang situations. And so the community, the business community, partnered with the city and created the Aurora Economic Development Commission. So from there, as people like to say, the rest is history. And I'm glad to be a part of this, and ready for us to tackle this and come up with some things that I think would be very helpful and useful to our listeners.
Well, thank you, Chairman. But I actually had a question. Yes.
Congressman,
Yeah.
listen, I didn't know we were going to float our boats. I got to say something that would top off these guys. I mean, they are just phenomenal.
This is not an organized conversation here. This is people understanding
Hey, look,
what's going
I'm
on.
telling you, to hear all these stories, I'm highly impressed. So I got to come up with something that's going to top them off.
Okay.
So, there was a time when I ran into President Johnson's daughter, Lyndon Baines Johnson. We were at the 50th March on Washington in Washington, D.C., and all the VIPs were under a tent socializing with one another. She happened to look over and saw me, and she saw that I was standing on the outside looking in. She walks over to the fence and opens the fence gate, and she lets me in. And we became friends there afterwards. But on all jokes aside, I was born like Sherman and Mike on the south side of Chicago in the not born in the housing projects, but I lived in the housing projects during my teenage stages. And on my way up, I met some phenomenal people who were in politics. And also, I can truthfully say, because of who I am today, and because of DuPage County believing in my work and trusting in my work, I was able to get the first Black History Proclamation for DuPage County on behalf of African Americans. I was able to have the Divine Nine honored for their community works over the years by Chairman Cronin. Chairman Conroy has given us Black History proclamations on behalf of the contributions of the Black community and what we have contributed throughout the years, because we just didn't stop, drop, and roll through here just yesterday. I was an originator for Naperville United, because there were some disparities out here when it came to sundown cities in DuPage County. And I was one of the original members for that. I worked for the Attorney General's office for 30 years. I worked for the city for 14 years. That's saying, in essence, that I worked for 4 attorney generals, 4 mayors of the city of Chicago. I became a committee woman out in the DuPage County area of Naperville for 2 years, and I ran for office as a county board member in the 5th district on the ticket with, I'm proud to say, Hillary Clinton, and also during the time Barack Obama was in office. And so I have thoroughly enjoyed my path coming from Chi-Town to the western suburbs. It's just that I didn't know, I couldn't understand, and I was very unrest with the type of flavor and atmosphere that was in the surrounding areas when it came to injustices, sundown cities, and inequality. And so that's city of Chicago, and those politicians there mold me for the things that I do today. So that's my background history. And I have one son. I'm at his home at this point in time in Texas, and I have 2 grandchildren, and I'm one of 16 siblings. And my mother lived to be 96 years old after all 3 of her husbands passed away. She lived to be 96
Wow, she just
years.
wore them out one by one, huh?
Yeah, she lived to be 96 years old. So that's all I want to say, because I know we need to follow the agenda, and I just
Oh, well,
want to,
but no, the
I
agenda is
have been thoroughly
advisory.
impressed with everyone else's background, believe me.
Yeah. So
So
Regina,
Regina,
what
I'm
a
so
number
glad
of
that
you.
Regina said that.
Uh-huh.
Go on, Congressman Foster.
Well, no, I was just saying that so you mentioned you also many of you came through to Chicago. And if you go back 1 or 2 more generations, it was all the Great Migration. That there's this very common pattern for politically active African Americans in the suburbs. It's sort of this three hopscotch steps or something like this. That seems to be a pattern. And is that how strong are the roots? You're saying you're in Texas right now, where your family is. I remember, at the time of Sandra Bland,
Yes.
there was a family, which is, 10 years ago now? 10 years ago,
Yes.
probably.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, that's where your question number 2,
Mhm.
is there a moment, person, or experience that strongly influenced your leadership? And I
Mhm.
want to say the moment was the housing projects. When I was 17 years old, the elevators would often break all the time due to mismanagement. And a lot of times, some of the young kids would stick the elevators where they wouldn't work properly. And we had women in that building who were heads of households. Many of them were elderly women. When they would come home from a day's work, they had to walk up 16 flights of stairs. And we thought to ourselves, what is it could we do to bring attention to this situation? And it was all about getting just some notebook paper, because I had witnessed Jesse Jackson and Operation Push do these petitions. Whenever something went wrong, they would come up with petitions. And the petitions I thought were about complaints, but they were actually about getting people elected. So we would make up these petitions, have these elderly people to sign, and we went down to the Chicago Housing Authority and we protest, because screeching wheels get the oil is what Jesse Jackson taught us. And he also taught us either you got to cut us in, or cut it out, meaning that we wanted inclusion. DEI was not even thought of back then. It was affirmative action that was in place. And that is what brought us to progress when it came to having the minorities join the majorities. And then my experience as far as unity partnership is concerned, the reason why I felt I had to create an organization that would address these issues were Trayvon Martin, Sandra Bland. Sandra Bland was a friend of mine. She was a church member of ours. And by the way, I want to say my spirituality was shaped by DuPage County out of DuPage AME Church. I was a Baptist before then, and I was also spiritual, but I was into God. I wasn't really into religion, but I found my niche with the AME Church and became a missionary. Joined the Missionary Society under Pastor Miller, and now the wonderful Pastor Childress Houston Jenkins, who is a young lady who just joined us about 3 or 4 years ago. She's a phenomenal preacher and pastor. But those particular genuine ingredients shape my ability to know that I have faith in God, and whenever I see something, say something. And those people that I met along the way, and I would be remiss not to mention Mrs. King, Dr. King's sister-in-law, Naomi King. I met her at the 50th March on Washington, just coming across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And she signed off on my activism. I had already gotten my mediation and advocacy ability to be able to transfer that from my office to the community after my retirement. And so those are the three things: the moment, the persons, and the experience that molded me to be pretty much what I am today.
Well, yeah, thank you. And I guess if you were Catholic, you'd also know that the Latin word for DEI is the Latin word for God, which is, I think, an interesting observation. So yeah, Gloria, did you want to say something about?
Yeah, and you know what? And this, Regina, I want to thank you for saying what you said, because you reminded me of some things that had happened to me, which also it's a good segue into that next question about who influenced you. And growing up for me, it was strong Black teachers, who because my class was like the experiment. When I went into ninth grade, we had forced integration in Alabama schools. And so we all left, our Black school and came to what was the white school. And my class was the first one to go through 4 years of high school after a forced integration. And so everyone thought we were going to kill each other. Nobody died. What did happen was that a lot of the white students were taken out of the schools, and their parents took them to private schools. So and they were getting a lot of funding for those private schools so that they could go there. Some came back when the money ran out and when their parents were no longer able to afford it. But when I look back at our graduation class of 1974, it was only about 20% white. But we had amazing Black teachers that came over from that experience. And I personally had some really great teachers who were white, and so the teachers were really strong influences. And then the other, um, because I had a dad who said to me, I don't care where you go to church, but you have to go to church every Sunday. So he shouldn't have said something like that to me, because I studied with everybody. I spent most of the time in the Presbyterian church because that was closest to my home. But I went to my mom's church, the Baptist church, and I went to all of those. And so all of those experiences shaped me. But talking about Jesse Jackson, so it's really appropriate since we just lost him. When I ran for office in 2002, because I think we not only have to be thinking about leading ourselves, we have to be looking at the generation that is coming after us and doing what we can to mentor them and give them hope and kind of share with them our experiences. So when I ran for office in 2002, I had this young student at Elgin Community College, And he was about 19 years old, and he was so excited about helping me on my campaign. And he was a white uh, uh, student, and he was president of the Young Democrats at ECC. I think it's the name of that group. And so he was just really, really just so energetic. He called me up one day and he said, Gloria, and I owned a business at that time called the Manufacturer's Source. It was a manufacturer's rep. I have a degree in industrial engineering, so I did that for 18 years. But and I in industrial in and manufacturing engineering for 18 years, and then the business for 10 years. But anyway, I had the business at that time, and he called me up and he said, Gloria, what are you doing? What are you doing? Because Jesse is coming to Elgin Community College, and you got to get out here. And I said, there's no way I can be there. He said, no. I already told him that you were coming, and he said he would like to meet you. And I was like, oh, wow. And I said, I have a lot of things. He said, Gloria, you have to come. So I said, okay. So I showed up and I'm thinking, there's no way Jesse's going to make time. This auditorium was packed. And I thought, no way in the world he's going to make time to talk to me. So my little helper grabbed my hand and took me. He said, "We're gonna go here, and as soon as Jesse's ready, he's gonna let us know, and he'll talk to you." And I said, "Okay." So I'm thinking, he's gonna be disappointed. And so pretty soon, someone opened the door and said, "Jesse will see you now." So I walked in and I introduced myself to him. And I said, "Well, I live in McHenry County. Why haven't you ever come out there?" He said, "No one's ever invited me." So we started to talk and everything, and I told him about my campaign and I was running for state rep. And so then they came out and they said, "Jesse, it's time for you to go on stage." So I was getting ready to go in the audience. He said, "Walk with me." And I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "Walk to the stage with me." So I said, okay. So I walked with him. I wasn't sure what was going to happen next. We got to the stage, and I thought at that point I'm gonna, exit. He said, "Oh no, come up on the stage." So they didn't have enough seats back there for me. They had 4 chairs back there. And so quickly someone brought another chair for me. And so we all sat down, and the instructor out there who was the advisor for this group for the Young Democrats, she got up and spoke. And of course, she had marched with MLK and been very involved in the movement and everything. And so she spoke, and then there were 2 other people that were sitting on the stage who spoke briefly, and then Jesse was introduced. So he came up to, and no one has ever done this in that campaign or since. He came up and he took the microphone and he said, "Hello, everyone. I'm Jesse Jackson." And of course, the applause just came up. And he said, "I want to speak to you about," because it was a voter registration drive, the whole thing that they were doing there. He said, "I want to speak to you about how important it is to vote. But before I say anything, I want to introduce you to someone." So he said, "I want you to meet Gloria Urch." I was Gloria Urch then. He said, "Come on up, Gloria." And I said, "Okay." He said, "Would you like to say a few words?" And I said, "Absolutely." So I took the microphone, and I had no way of knowing I was going to end up on that stage that day. And I said, "It's very appropriate that we're here today with Jesse Jackson, because at his speech at the Democratic convention in 1988, he talked about how it costs less to educate than it does to incarcerate. And my mind was a lot sharper then. I could almost quote verbatim. I did what he said, and he was in complete shock.
That was
And
Jesse. If it was a current, listen, Jesse always knew there would always be a current challenge or needs in the community from the people who lived in disparity. But I'd like to get to the pressing issues that he addressed way back then that are in existence right now. And that is in the African American community on a local level and on a national level. Gloria, it's not too much different today than it was back in the 60s, because
Exactly.
our history is being erased. We're being taken back to lack of education. Our voters' rights are at stake. And so with these questions asking, what is the pressing issue African American people are facing on a local and national level? I would think economic disparities, number one. And that is because in the underserved communities, there are lack of resources and opportunities. And as far as job opportunities, there are low wages and lack of jobs. And then when it comes to housing, they'll say affordable housing, but is it really affordable? For those who are only making $7 and $15 an hour, the answer is no. And so when Jesse Jackson shows up, it's about the disparities in the communities. And it doesn't surprise me that when you called, he came, because every time I called, he answered. And I was so privileged to be asked, and I think Mike was too, and Mike can elaborate on that. When media called a little Regina Brent, a nobody, to ask of me, what did I think about the life of Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson? Do you know?
Yeah. So so Sherman, what was your breakthrough moment that you can think of right now?
I want to jump on what Regina was saying, but I think it goes back to, the question was, what is the most pressing issue or one challenge we want policymakers to better understand? And I think it goes back to policymakers, congressmen, senators, stop forcing African Americans to push you to do what you said you were going to do on paper, whether it's the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. And it's just, we're coming back to this whole thing of now all of a sudden we're not going to follow the rules of law.
Right.
Because we feel that people of color are getting over on us. And so now we're going to change the rules. And wait a minute, we're all part of the human race. And it's something that I don't think anyone expected what the current administration is doing, but then you see the Republicans are right there with them. So it's not, you can't just say it's him. It's the Republicans that are backing it. Now also, I just read this morning, they're talking about instituting a bill to create a martial law to stop the midterm elections. Again, changing the rules. And you've got Republicans who are going to sit there and because they have the majority, they're going to go along with it. And so it's making people, especially in the African American community, you worry about the future for your grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren. And you're sitting here, and as much as people, I was one of those beginning to think that we had some breakthrough in race relations after Barack Obama and things that were happening, but it's what's going on in the administration and with the Republicans that the gap, I guess, it never really moved much. And it seems like under the cloak of smiles and lies, here we are back in a situation where you had this stuff going on and doing Lincoln and before that. And as you move forward, it's like, why can't, we've seen this kind of thing before, okay?
Yes.
We've seen it through slavery. We've seen it through Jim Crow. We've seen it through Hitler. where people finally stood up and said, okay, we got to change this. But then we're coming right back to it, all based on fear. The basic fear is, oh my God, they take control. They're going to do to us what we did to them.
That's
I don't
right.
But
That's
let
right.
me jump in real quick though.
Yes, go ahead, Mike.
I was just having this conversation recently. When you think of the state that we're in right now, which I have no doubt in my mind we're going to come through it stronger, because we've always come through it stronger. But when you look at where we are right now and where we've given ground, I lay all of this, or at least 90% of it, at the feet, and he gets no credit for it. But I have to lay it at the feet of John Roberts. John Roberts undid the Voting Rights Act. Okay, he did it. He's undoing the civil rights laws. He's given this man complete immunity. You know, just go down the list of things that he's done that affects us through the Supreme Court. And I was having this conversation before, and I said, you got to understand, and I was talking to some kids, that our freedoms are very fragile. He could wake up tomorrow and make an executive order and say, we decided that let's do something crazy. Black people can't vote anymore.
Yes.
We would sue, and we would win, and then we go to the appellate court. We probably win there, but guess who's waiting for us? His Supreme Court. And if those people, there's no other court above that. That's why they're called the Supreme Court. Once they make their ruling, it's it. Now, what he's done, taking it to another level, is that if I don't like the ruling, I'm just not going to follow.
That's
Okay.
right.
But let's go back to John Roberts. Who gave him complete immunity to do what he's doing? John Roberts courts. So I'm still on, in fact, Gloria has written a book. So I'm literally want to get with you and probably document some of these things that the Supreme Court has done to take us back, not 10 years, 10, 20 years, but almost 100 years. They're reaching into their bags and pulling laws out from the 17 and 1800s. So we have to be aware of what's going on all the time. And then finally, I'll say this, and then I'll let someone else have the floor. As far as Jesse Jackson is concerned, I've been saying this probably for at least 40, 50 years. Jesse Jackson was about 50 years ahead of his time. Right. And Gloria can attest to that, because he talked about rainbow coalitions. This is not something that's just new. You know, he talked about rainbow coalitions when I was a child. And then to have us run for office in a county that's 187 years old, and our population is 7%, if that. So if I'm sitting there waiting for the black vote to come in and save me or elect me, it's not going to happen. But applying the principles of Jesse Jackson, he talked about the Hispanics, the blacks, the gays, the seniors, the young, the old, everybody coming together, because we have more in common than we have differences. But the rich and the powerful want to keep us all divided because they know it's more of us than them. Yep. And if we ever realize as a people, as humanity, how much we actually do have in common. We all want clean roads and schools and parks and nice homes. We all want those things. So these things are a commonality to us. But the power structure makes it seem as though you don't have because those people over there, those others is preventing you from getting what you deserve. So you gotta go after them, and we will help you go after them so that you'll get whatever it is you magically think you need or deserve. Well, all you have to do is go out and vote and unelect some of these guys that's in Washington who came from somewhere. They came from state reps, senators, and county boards. They moved up the line. And we need to make sure we go back and unelect them because it's really something that we need to really address. And again, I'll go
I
back
think
and-
it's also important to celebrate progress where there's real progress. I mean, half of Aurora is represented by Lauren Underwood. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Her district is maybe it's 10% African American.
yeah,
Maybe
and so
15.
here's the
Yeah,
thing.
Gloria, your district, your district is probably 10 or 15% African American at
Well,
most.
yeah,
So that's where the
and
Rainbow
Michael
Coalition comes in.
Michael brings up an important point, as you do, Congressman Foster. So we the Black population in McHenry County is less than 5%.
Yep.
So for me to win an election the way I did, I had to have a lot of carryover votes, right? So I was well known because I'd done a lot of teaching and been involved in a lot of volunteerism and everything. But in the primary, I had two fine opponents that were running against me, two males that were running against me in the primary. And I got 53% of the vote. So two of us went from there because the way I feel like, Regina was talking about her spirituality, and I feel the same way. When I decided that I was going to, because I had no intention of running for office. I left Riverside at the end of 2021, and I said, don't dare tell anybody I've retired, because I haven't. I just want to be closer to home and start working on my doctorate degree. And I'm still going to be involved, and I may go into long-term care, but it's not going to be over in Lake County. If I do, it'll be in McHenry County. But the thing is that I had people calling me up saying, Gloria, you should run for office. You should run. And I was like, no, I'm not going to run for office. And one of my best friends, Nancy Glissman, called, and she said, I know you said that you weren't going to run for office because you have too many hard things that you're working on right now. And she said, there is an opening in your district, because the person who was representing us in District 2 was a Democrat, and she had moved out of the district. So she had to be replaced by a Democrat. And she said, you should apply for that job. That's not hard. All you have to do is submit your resume and apply for it. That's not hard. And I said, okay, Nancy.
It's wonderful how people can tell you it's not
I
hard.
know, right? Right? They find a way to justify this, right? I said, okay, Nancy, I tell you what. I said, I will do it. And she said, if you do, I promise I will walk with you. I said, that's beautiful. I said, I will do it. I said, but here's the thing. I said, there are going to be a lot of people who are applying for that position. I said, I may be the one that's best qualified for it, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to get it, because the chair gets to make that decision. I said, so here's the thing. I said, if I'm not appointed, then I will run for it and I'll take it. And she said, okay. And so that's what happened. So someone else was appointed to that position. She's on the board right now. She's a very fine candidate. Her district changed. So she was appointed to the position and was able to be in the position for 10 months. And then the beginning of the next, the beginning of our tenure there after the election, she went to District 3. So very fine candidate and very fine board member now. But I ran, and emerged as the two of us emerged from the primary. And then when we got to the general election, there were five. And I talking about Regina's spirituality, I said to God, okay, if this is where I'm supposed to be, then I'll win, And so, and I'm talking about the primary, coming out of the primary, and then I had to go back to God, and it's like, if I don't, then I know there's something better in store for me. That's what I always think. So I'm detaching from the outcome. I want to do this, but I'm okay because I know there's something better. So I had to have another talk with God, and I was like, you know what? If I win, because now we got five people running for this for two seats, right? So the first and second place person would get those two seats. I said, so if I win, God, I'd like to come in first. So I got my wish. I came in first among five candidates with a lead of 841 votes. So it was very decisive. So I wanted that because I didn't want anybody to look back and say, well, it was a fluke, But people clearly cast their ballots for me. One of the things that was going on was the Year of the Woman. So that worked to my advantage. And it also worked to my advantage then is that I knocked on more doors than anyone else running for that seat. We knocked on about 8,000 doors, So it was amazing. So it was wonderful. And the only other thing I wanted to piggyback on was when you were talking about disparities, in my opinion, is health disparities. And in fact, the CDC said that there's racism and discrimination at every step of the way. This is one of the reasons I chose health psychology. At diagnosis, at treatment, and in outcomes. Now we know that the rate of Black and Brown people who died from COVID, just like all of the other 10 all-cause top diseases, it's like 2 to 1. You look at things like uterine cancer, 2 to 1. We look at, an educated Black woman has is at more risk of getting. So you can't say it's because a lack of access to healthcare or education or any of those things. An educated Black woman is more likely to die from um, uh, delivery, in childbirth, than an uneducated white woman. There's all kinds of disparities there.
Well, I think it's really neat that, that is like very nearly Lauren Underwood's #1 issue in Congress.
Exactly.
And she,
In fact,
she seldom gives a speech where doesn't occur somewhere there, and specifically the issue with moms. And
She
that is
passed that legislation for the mama bus
Yep.
because she
Yep.
had a friend who was working in the CDC. She got pregnant and died in childbirth, and
That's right. And I think it's, it's real progress that, that she made. Yeah, Regina, you have your hand up, and let's see, we have 14 minutes left.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I'd like to get back.
if we just go circle around here and try to talk a little about your hope and your vision for the future. So what will the second 100 years look like?
Because I'm not going to leave this call as a Debbie Downer.
Okay.
We can't afford to do that, Bill, Congressman. We just cannot afford to do that.
Bill.
The thing of the matter is, you have a question, where do you see progress? And I look at this situation as our race of people is that we have improved 10 foot forward, but we've been rolled back 5 feet backwards. And where DEI was in place, it was never the law like affirmative action. So they had opportunity to bring it in, and if they didn't want to, they didn't have to. And as soon as they can get rid of it, they did. Affirmative action was the law. It opened doors, but DEI afforded us equity. 600,000 Black women have lost their jobs across the nation, and many of them could be the head of their households. There's another question here saying, how does national conversation impact what we see locally? Whatever is trickled down from the top, from the macro level, affects the micro level.
Yes.
Okay? Meaning, in other words, everything and every decision that's made on a federal level is a trickle down effect to the local level. That means SNAP benefits. Anytime a president will stand up at the State of the Union and brag about the fact that he took food off of people's tables,
Right.
is ridiculous and obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is the George Floyd Act, the HB 3653. I heard Dr. King on Suskind's program back in the 60s talk about the fact that Kennedy, if only he would sign executive orders, he could get the Jim Crow bill wiped out and replaced with the Civil Rights Bill. However, I said to myself, well, at least King and Trump would have had that in common because he believed in executive orders.
Mm-hmm.
We've had several Democratic presidents in that White House that did not reinstate our voters' rights because, as Mike said earlier in this conversation, any day and every day we wake up as African American people, our rights could be taken away, not only in the South, but right up here in the North.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you talk about the George Floyd Act, the HB 3653, we worked on that. Unity Partnership helped the legislators and the law enforcement agencies come together down in Springfield to make sure that they do that reform, the police reform bill, so that they would have body cams and people who could not bail themselves out of jail because of their disparities in income could get out without having to stay in jail. Vaccines. You got this guy, RFK. Do you know measles and mumps? All of these diseases that occurred during the 60s, during the Jim Crow days, is reigniting themselves because they're convincing people who have low information that they don't need vaccines.
Exactly.
So if you think you're going to sit up in the ivory towers and not be affected by people who are not vaccinated, then you are just simply making a mistake. And the other thing is whitewashing our history. Listen, if my child can do its ancestry to find out that his great-great-grandmother was a slave who was being raped by a master, and it bothers him, it should bother the white child who has to sit up and read that same history to know that they don't want to be like their ancestry. That in this world, they want to make it a better place. They want to take chaos to a community, a beloved community, opposed to hate, racism, and supremacy. They need to know that maybe they didn't inflict slavery upon our people, but guess what? You're benefited from it just because of the color of your skin. And last but not least, I'd like to talk about hope. What is the hope for the Black community? And I just do feel that we have to take responsibility for what it is we're not doing. First of all, we need to stay in school. Secondly, stay in God. The fathers need to stay in the homes. Young people need to learn how to volunteer so that they can grow and take those experiences out into the world, not based on a pay, but based on the qualities that they've learned in order to grow as a person. They need to stay curious. They need to read their history so that they can know that this too shall pass, because we are a people of resilience, and this will not last long. But when it does, for instance, during the pandemic was supposed to make us come out differently than what we went in. We need to vote.
Okay, yep. And so we are now, unfortunately, down to 8 minutes left.
All right.
So I have
Okay,
to
I'll jump in and I'll be quick.
Okay,
I
yeah.
Go
promise.
ahead.
So I think it's when I speak to people in a historical form, I'll start out by saying, I'm the first Black woman to get elected in McHenry County's 186-year history. And I'm saying that not to brag, I'm saying that to let you know that things are changing, because there was a time when that would not have happened. So it's happening now. So we can see that progress. So what we can do to have a brighter future, we have to let people know that they need to vote. This is one thing, and I have to say about Democrats, is that we put more power in the courts than we do at the ballots. We have to win the vote. Don't, because you see what can happen in the courts. They can overturn things. But if we vote and we get the people in office that will represent us and fight for us and advocate for our interests, that's going to be a winner. So we need to get people out there to vote. I love it that the young people in where I live in Crystal Lake, they staged a walkout. They staged a protest to get ICE out of the communities. And they were told not to do this by their schools. But we've had like two walkouts, two planned walkouts, and that brings me great hope, because that shows that our younger generations, they're not buying this. They're not buying it. And they are more.
And not only are they willing to walk out of schools, they're willing to show up on Saturdays when school is not in session at these
That's
protests.
right.
And that's a different level of commitment.
It's
Yeah.
very
So
similar to what happened in
Sherman,
the
what's
60s.
your thoughts of hope in the
Well, it's
future?
very similar to what happened in the 60s and on the college campuses and all, where the students rose up. And, you know, we mentioned a lot of the younger folks who got involved. And for me, in terms of the pride, is and the hope is that the young people will continue to do what they're doing. And they're not, some people saying, well, they're just doing that to get out of class. No, don't berate them. Okay. Don't berate the kids. And then also for a lot of us, we have to be out there. We have
Yes.
to talk to
Show
our
them.
grandkids.
That's right.
Kids.
That's
Show
I
right.
mean, I had just my grandson was here and he was asking me about our family history. And I mentioned, he said, well, how did you come up with the names of my mom and my uncle? And I said, okay, we saw this miniseries, Roots. And he said, what? I said, have you read the book Roots? He says, no. I says, okay, well, we can go on Prime Video. Let's pour down the first series of Roots. And I sat there and watched it with him. And he was like, this is freaking me out.
Right.
What this country did to us.
Mhm.
And to provide that history, and then also trying to lead them to understand, it's for you to know. Don't let it anchor you to you can't do anything.
That's right.
Always keep in the back of your mind. And he was very appreciative of that. He had an opportunity to meet Angela Davis when Aurora University had her there. And he heard her, and then he went up. We had the reception afterwards, and he walked up to her, grabbed her hand. I am so delighted. He's 16 years old, and he said, "I'm delighted to meet you. I've heard so much about you, what you were saying." And she was just looking at him, and she said, "Well, you know, your generation is going to have to be the ones to keep it going." And he heard that, and that was something that he just stuck with him. And he said, calls me Papa. He said, Papa, he said, you know, the stuff about roots and all, this has just been one hell of a trip, because we always bring them up. We do a Jenkins family outing to the auto show. Everybody, we all go out, then we go out to dinner, and so, but we have to let people know that we all have to stay involved. We all have to demonstrate to the young people, but also be cognizant of the fact that young people can show you some things that probably didn't even think about. I mean, how many of us said, "Oh, man, I can't. What can I do with this thing?" And the kids will take it. That's all you had to do.
Yeah, they should go
Yeah.
look at some pictures of Angela Davis when she was 20 years old. She was a firecracker.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. And
So,
so,
Michael, do you want,
Michael.
yeah, do you want to
Well,
say a little bit about the vision of the future?
well, yes. I say this all the time, and I was talking to my grandsons, and I was telling them that I think that what drives me is that my vision is that at some point in time, if I could come back 150 years from now and have a conversation with my kids, and they look at me and say, what did you do when all of this stuff was going on? And I want to be able to look them in squarely in the eye and say, you know, we fought as hard as we could fight, and now we're running a relay, and we're going to hand this off to you. When you start thinking about, my catchphrase is always "we the people," because we are. It doesn't say "we the rich"; it says "we the people." And when we start to sit down and think about what we need to do, it's going to take all of us to make sure that this thing keeps going, because again, life is nothing more than a relay race. We carry the baton for so many years, and we wait for our next generations to pick up that torch. And then we look at these No Kings marches. You got 7 million people showing up, and it's probably going to be twice that many on the next one. The people, we the people, are claiming our freedom and our rights. People will always try to take that away from you, but we as a people will claim our rights, our freedoms, and we have to make sure that the next generation coming up, and the generation after them, and the generation after them are ready to carry that torch, because you could so easily lose it. You could so easily lose it.
And Mike, can I throw something in,
Mhm.
Congressman? We have to say, as far as the lawmakers and the politicians and all the federal governmental agencies, is when you walk into your boardrooms and you don't see anyone who look like you need to ask yourself one question: who's missing and why aren't they here? And do something about it. That goes for our educational systems, our law enforcement systems, our judicial systems. Black people need representation in this country that would make it equal and give us equity. Thank you so much for inviting me.
And one final thing, we have to remember collaboration. So we won't get anywhere, just like the Underground Railroad history that I do. And those of you from DuPage County, I know you know Gwinnett Tilly Turner, right? And so we
Absolutely.
we have worked together on tours and that kind of thing. But we this whole thing, it didn't happen just with Black people. We had to have people, from the other side, whites, leaders, and abolitionists that aided us in this effort. We can't do this alone. So we may not have what we think is a lot in common, but if we start to talk to each other, we find out that we have more in common than we differ. So we have to do that. We have to go and talk to people and get to know people and let them get to know us.
I
Because
absolutely agree.
because when we do that, things change, because now they see you as a person and not as a Black person. They see you as a person. So we have to talk to each other.
We have more in common than we have differences
That's right.
as a
and
people.
remembering history, which is really what Black History Month is about. The true history. We're struggling to try to keep the president from erasing from history the fact that George Washington had slaves. Okay, that he is ordering people to remove those displays. Okay, and that's not right. The history is important, and you have to look at it. 100 years ago, Naperville was a sundown town. Okay,
Mhm.
and that is a historic. You can read about it, and good for Naperville. We're not hiding from that. You can go over to the
That's
Naper
right.
settlement, and they will have a display on the city council meetings of when they were discussing being a sundown town, and so as long as you remember the history, you have a chance of continuing progress into the future.
That's
And
right.
so I
That's
I want to thank you for helping us out, remembering Black History
Well,
Month.
this has been great, and I would like to have contact information for all of you, if you don't mind, Congressman Foster sharing that with us so
You?
that we can continue to collaborate beyond today.
Please do.
I
Absolutely.
think
Yeah, you're
Hillary
all
probably has all our
wonderful.
contact information, so I'll call Hillary and make sure I get everybody's contact information.
I'll say
Okay.
that I'm hoping that my people realize, as African Americans, that if we're not at the table, as Dr. King says, we're going to be on the menu. Therefore, vote, vote,
Yeah.
vote, vote.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Vote.
Okay.
You.
All
Thank
right.
you,
Bye-bye.
Congressman.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you,
Hillary.
Congressman. Thank you. I
And
appreciate
thank you,
everything.
Maria.
Great.
Please give
Great.
Maria my gratitude. Thank you. Bye, Sherman. Bye, Mike. Bye,
All right.
Maria.
Have a good one,
Bye,
everybody.
Regina.